Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Hamnet. This was directed by Chloe Zhao. This is the big obligatory Academy Awards contender for the year. Many might compare this particular formula to something like Shakespeare in Love that came out in the late 1990s, in the sense that this is not an interpretation of an iconic Shakespeare play, but more a kind of a historical dramatization of him as a playwright, writing these iconic plays for the stage. It's about the context with which he explores his own creativity. It's like what drove him emotionally, what inspired him. In the case of Shakespeare in Love, it was a lot of love and romance, obviously, for something like Romeo and Juliet. But here, what he's exploring is something more dark and complex. Death, obviously, because it is Hamlet we're talking about here as the focus. Here, Shakespeare, or William, I should say, I think he is exploring his failures as a man, as a father, a family man. It's about his own acceptance of death and loss, and how one finds sanctuary through something that is artistically therapeutic. I would say this movie is a meditation overall on grief, but it is stripped down to the bare bones. Shakespeare in this movie is only referred to as Will for the majority of the film, and you see very little of his artistic spirit or the personality of the man behind the madness, or you don't see it until much later in the film. I'd say the first half of this film, particularly the opening, is very sensory, very wispy and art house. It's like Shakespeare in Love, but by way of Terrence Malick. It wants to connect you to the mysticism, the dangers, the natural tranquility of nature, and a lot of this is emblemized within one of our main characters, played by Jessie Buckley. She is the love interest of William Shakespeare in the film. But yeah, that's part of why it is very skeletal, very flighty by design. And it looks good. I think this movie has gorgeous cinematography, fantastic sound design that feels quite immersive, and this movie isn't afraid of silence. It allows moments to breathe, especially in the opening of the film where it feels right, and you have a real sense of place as well. And there's this whole budding romance at this point that is going on between Will and the Jessie Buckley character. I was almost allured by this section of the film, I would say, even though the symbolism felt a tad bit on the nose. It's the typical trope of the feminine mystique represented by Jessie Buckley, and she is the center of this grief. And of course, she has like magical powers where she sees visions, sees into the future, as is the power of woman. But it was quite done, as I said, visually, and Buckley's performance, nuanced performance, is what kept me with it for a while. But sometime within that first half of the movie, I started to feel quite concerned about where this film was headed, where it's going to go, because in my head, I'm like, okay, there's not a lot is happening. There's not a lot of conflict. Shakespeare here is played by Paul Mescal, and he feels almost like a peripheral character where the focus is more on Buckley and the family that they've built while he's off, writing in London for the theater. But once you have seen the entire film, all three acts where they've tied it all together, that is when I felt the most frustrated and annoyed. I will be honest. And we've gutted Shakespeare's story of any complexity so we can basically drown, quite literally almost, in misery porn. We've replaced all the strong storytelling here with like these images, beautiful images from an art gallery, and we've lost any real conflict. Instead, we've replaced it with like these shrill, guttural battle cries of the actors. Long, drawn-out shots where every actor is doing their best Maria Falconetti impression, but with none of the power or the meaning. I genuinely almost feel bad for actors in Hollywood these days, just because to me it's the talent pool has never been bigger, and it's more competitive than ever, and yet it's like they're reduced to these humiliation rituals in the movies, in the writing. It's the wailing and the heaving. It just feels insulting to them as artists that they're having to be put through all of this, and yet they're given so little to chew on at the root of it all. In a movie like this, these beautiful portraits of the actors, these vulnerable images of their face, I think it's got to be very instinctual, and you have to be very purposeful where you place that in the movie. Instead, we are bombarded with them as if this is a Tom Hooper film. It's as if Chloe Zhao was telling each actor, okay, remember, this is your big moment. This is your big Oscar reel that we want to play at the awards, so give it all you've got. I'd say Buckley does a beautiful job with what she's given. I've always loved her as an actress. I think everything that she's in, she somehow spins it into gold. The first time I ever saw her was in, I'm thinking of Ending Things, and that's a tough role to play, especially when it's Charlie Kaufman, and she's so effortless in that film, and that part is so different from this part. I think she has such a natural quality to her face and in her eyes. So when she registers an emotion, you believe it. She's incredibly present in this performance, and yet I felt as if she was just breaking her back, working overboard just to prove to us that all this grimacing, all this pain is somehow necessary. But unfortunately, she couldn't save the film for me. And by contrast, Paul Mescal is playing Shakespeare as fairly average, kind of unremarkable. I'd go so far as to say almost uncompelling. He just feels lifeless to me up until the final act of the movie. And yes, this is partially by design when you look at the structure of the movie, but it's like we know so little of William up to this point. And to me, that's the screenplay's fault, not Mescal's. I keep trying to understand what is the point of this film beyond its manipulative tactics, as elegant and poetic as they seem externally. But finally, we get to the third act and it's like we're getting somewhere. Here we get to see Shakespeare at work doing what he knows best, and yet there's so little substance in this section other than reiterating the point about how art can be very therapeutic for both the audience and the creators alike. I wanted to see this film completely redone in the editing room, but where we shift the focus a little bit more to Shakespeare so we give it some balance that it desperately needs. Even when we have the big climactic epiphany moment where all the emotions of the characters are brought together in the end of the film, still there's like this shallowness to it, and it feels empty. We're drawing the moments out, the shots for so long. I was squirming in my seat. And when it comes to the musical score, as if selecting Max Richter wasn't on the nose enough with all the kind of brooding, heavy, neoclassical inspired music that he makes. But in the end of the movie, I'm not going to give away spoilers, but they use one of his most famous selections, On the Nature of Daylight. Go listen to it if you don't know what it is. I'm sure you will recognize it. That felt like the final knife in the coffin for me as a viewer when it comes to experiencing this movie. I was thinking to myself, really, of all of the musical selections you could choose from Max Richter, you choose the most overplayed one that is already attached to so many iconic movie moments from the last 15 years. And this big moment at the end where the whole audience and the performers are brought together, it could have been so heartbreaking and so moving, and yet I didn't feel anything because the instincts behind it creatively just don't feel right to me. You realize that the Buckley character in the end, she has no interest in her husband at all or any interest in his art, and yet so little of their personal drama is explored throughout the movie. This movie has the dressings of all the art house movies that you love, but to me it's like it's all glued together with like syrup and confectioner sugar. And this really does remind me of Chloe Zhao's Oscar-winning film back in 2020, Nomadland, a film that I really disliked when I saw it. And if you saw my review for it, you know that. But the whole time I watched that film, I was struggling. I'm like, where is the binding of this? Where is the point of it? It meanders and meanders to no avail. I look at Shakespeare in Love, and yes, it's a completely different film in tone, and yet it's so much more clever. It's witty. It's got this humor to it. And this, I'm just, again, I'm struggling what to make of it. I don't recommend this film. I think there's much more interesting films you could see out there. So yes, that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.